The Riverside Country Club glowed with late afternoon sunlight, every detail of the reception perfect. White roses cascaded from crystal vases, champagne flowed freely, and 200 guests celebrated the union of Alexander Hayes and Victoria Bennett. At 34, Alexander had built one of the most successful architectural firms in the state. Victoria, 31, ran a nonprofit dedicated to arts education. They were the golden couple, and today was supposed to be their beginning. Alexander stood at the head table, his arm around Victoria's waist as they cut the cake together. Her laugh was musical as frosting somehow ended up on his nose. The photographer captured the moment, pure joy, unguarded happiness. Alexander kissed his wife, tasting sweetness and promise. "I love you," he whispered against her lips. "Forever." "Forever," she echoed, her eyes shining. The best man clinked his glass, preparing to give a toast. Alexander's phone buzzed in his pocket. He'd forgotten to silence it. He ignored it. This was his wedding day. Nothing could be more important than this moment. But the phone buzzed again and again. Victoria noticed his distraction. "Everything okay?" "Just turning it off," he assured her, pulling out the phone to silence it. But the screen showed 7 missed calls from a number he didn't recognize and a text message. "Urgent, medical matter. Courier en route to your location. Do not ignore." A cold feeling settled in Alexander's stomach. He'd had routine blood work done 2 weeks ago as part of updating his life insurance policy for the marriage. They'd said everything was fine, just standard procedure. What could be urgent? "Alex?" Victoria touched his arm. "What is it?" "Probably just work," he lied, forcing a smile. "Someone needs building permits approved. I'll handle it quickly." He kissed her forehead and walked toward the reception hall entrance, his heart rate increasing with each step. A man in a medical courier uniform stood just inside the door, holding a sealed envelope. "Alexander Hayes?" "Yes." "I need to see identification, please. This is confidential medical information." Alexander's hands shook slightly as he pulled out his driver's license. The courier checked it, nodded, and handed over the envelope. It was marked "Confidential, Urgent Patient Notification" in red letters.
If you want to uncover more chilling true crime stories and see justice exposed, subscribe to Crime Vaults as we bring light to the darkest true crime cases and never miss the secrets hidden in plain sight.
"There's a private room just down this hallway," a staff member offered, seeing his distress. "Second door on the right." Alexander walked on autopilot, his architect's mind noticing absurd details, the crown molding, the sconce lighting, the texture of the carpet under his dress shoes. He entered a small study lined with books and closed the door. His fingers fumbled with the envelope seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper on official medical laboratory letterhead. Patient, Alexander James Hayes. Test date, 2 weeks prior. Test type, HIV antibody screening. Result, positive. Confirmatory test, positive. Status, HIV positive. The paper slipped from his fingers, floating to the floor like a death sentence. The room tilted. Alexander grabbed the edge of a desk to steady himself. This couldn't be real. There had to be a mistake. But the letterhead was legitimate. The same lab his doctor had used for years. His name was right there, spelled correctly, his date of birth accurate. HIV positive. His mind raced backward through his sexual history. He'd been careful, always careful. Except for those few weeks 3 years ago, after his father's death, when he'd been drinking too much, grieving too hard. There had been someone, a brief relationship during a conference in another city. They'd been together maybe 4 or 5 times. He couldn't even remember her name clearly now. Had they always used protection? He'd been so drunk one night, the details fuzzy. That must have been it. That was where this came from. And now he'd married Victoria. Perfect, trusting Victoria who'd waited until marriage for intimacy, who'd wanted everything to be special and traditional.
They'd planned to consummate their marriage tonight at the resort hotel, their honeymoon suite already waiting. If she slept with him tonight, he could infect her. He could give her a death sentence on their wedding night. The thought made him physically ill. He barely made it to the small bathroom adjoining the study before he vomited, his body rejecting the horror of what he'd just learned. Alexander rinsed his mouth, splashed water on his face, and stared at the reflection in the mirror. The man looking back at him was still wearing his tuxedo, his boutonniere slightly crushed now, his eyes wild with panic. He couldn't do this to Victoria. He couldn't destroy her life. She deserved someone healthy, someone whole, someone who could give her the children she wanted and the long life they'd planned together. His phone buzzed again. Victoria's face filled the screen, her contact photo from their engagement shoot, smiling and radiant. Alexander stared at the phone until it stopped ringing. Then he turned it off completely. He had to leave, right now, before he could hurt her, before his weakness could destroy the woman he loved more than his own life. The study had a door leading to an exterior hallway. Alexander took one last look at the medical report lying on the floor, then walked out into the fading sunlight. He kept walking past his car, past the valet station, down the long driveway of the country club. Behind him, inside the reception hall, Victoria was probably looking for him now, wondering where he'd gone. In a few minutes, she'd start to worry. In an hour, she'd be frantic. But he couldn't face her, couldn't explain, couldn't watch her face crumble when she learned what he was, what he'd almost done to her. So, Alexander Hayes walked away from his wedding reception, from his bride, from his entire life, disappearing into the approaching darkness without a word of explanation.
The motel room in the outskirts of the city smelled of mildew and desperation. Alexander sat on the edge of the sagging bed, staring at the wall where he'd taped articles about HIV treatment, life expectancy charts, and CDC information sheets. 3 months of research. 3 months of preparing to die. He'd withdrawn money from his personal accounts before they could be frozen, enough to live on for a while. He'd abandoned his architectural firm, his home, his entire identity. The only possession he'd kept was his wedding ring, which now sat on the nightstand, mocking him with its promise of forever. His phone, a new burner phone, untraceable, showed no messages because no one had this number. He'd cut off all contact with everyone from his former life. Victoria, his business partner, his friends, his mother, all of them searching for him, he knew, probably thinking he was dead or kidnapped or insane. Maybe he was insane. What rational person disappeared from their own wedding? But every time he thought about reaching out, he remembered that medical report. HIV positive. He couldn't burden Victoria with that. Couldn't watch her throw away her life to care for a dying man out of misplaced loyalty or pity. The television played news quietly in the background, a constant companion in his isolation. Alexander barely watched it anymore, but suddenly a familiar face filled the screen, and he grabbed the remote to turn up the volume. Missing for 91 days now, Alexander Hayes, a prominent local architect, vanished from his own wedding reception on June 15th. His wife, Victoria Hayes, is making a renewed plea for information. The screen cut to Victoria standing in front of microphones, her face gaunt and exhausted. She wore black as if already mourning him. The sight of her made Alexander's chest constrict with physical pain. "Alex, if you're out there, if you can hear this, please come home." Victoria's voice broke. "I don't care what happened. I don't care about the reason. Just please let me know you're alive. Please." Alexander's hand reached toward the screen, touching her pixelated face. He wanted to call her, to tell her he was sorry, to explain, but what could he say? That he'd run away to protect her? That he was dying and didn't want to take her down with him? The news segment continued. Authorities have found no evidence of foul play. Hayes' car was left at the venue, his wallet and identification missing. Some speculate he may have suffered a mental health crisis. Others wonder if he simply got cold feet and ran.
Cold feet. The phrase made Alexander laugh bitterly. If only it were that simple. His laptop sat open on the small desk, dozens of tabs about HIV still displayed. He'd learned everything he could about the virus in 3 months. How it progressed, what treatments existed, how long people typically lived. The statistics varied, but the message was clear. His life as he'd known it was over.
He'd thought about suicide in those first dark weeks. It would be easier than this slow march toward inevitable decline. But something held him back. Maybe cowardice. Maybe a stubborn thread of hope that a cure might be found. Maybe just the basic human instinct to survive. A knock on the motel room door made him freeze. No one knew he was here. He'd paid in cash, used a fake name. The knocking came again, more insistent. "Housekeeping!" Alexander exhaled, just the maid. "Come back later," he called out. "I need to clean, sir. It's been 3 days." "I said later." He heard her mutter something in another language and walk away. Alexander knew he was becoming one of those people, the kind who lived in cheap motels and shouted at housekeepers, the kind people whispered about and avoided. He'd fallen so far from the successful architect who'd walked into that country club 3 months ago. His stomach growled. He hadn't eaten since yesterday, surviving on vending machine snacks and occasional fast food. Cooking required caring about staying alive, and most days he wasn't sure he did. The burner phone rang, startling him. Only one person had this number, the clinic where he'd gone for follow-up testing, trying to understand his diagnosis better, to learn how long he had. "Hello?" "Mr. Johnson?" The nurse used the fake name he'd given them. "This is County Health Services. We have your test results back." "And?" Alexander's voice was flat. What did it matter? He already knew the answer. "Sir, I'm showing here that your HIV antibody test came back negative." Alexander's brain stuttered. "What? That's impossible. I was diagnosed 3 months ago. I have the paperwork." "Can you come into the clinic? There seems to be some confusion about your case. Dr. Martinez wants to speak with you personally." "What kind of confusion?" "I really think you should come in, sir. There may have been—" The nurse paused, choosing her words carefully. "An administrative error with your previous test." An administrative error. The words hung in the air like a life raft thrown to a drowning man. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, Alexander said, already grabbing his jacket. Dr. Martinez was a tired-looking woman in her 50s who gestured for Alexander to sit in her office. She had a thick file in front of her and an expression that mixed sympathy with professional concern. "Mr. Johnson, or should I say Mr. Hayes," she raised an eyebrow. "The administrative staff did some checking when your new test results didn't match your history. Your real identity wasn't hard to discover. You're all over the news." Alexander slumped in the chair. "Just tell me about the test results." "You don't have HIV," Dr. Martinez said bluntly. "You never did. The positive result you received 3 months ago was a catastrophic lab error. Your blood sample was mislabeled and confused with another patient's sample. That patient, who did test positive, received your negative results, while you received theirs." The room seemed to tilt on its axis. Alexander gripped the arms of the chair, unable to process what he was hearing. That's impossible. The courier service, the official letterhead, my name was right there." "The courier service was legitimate. The letterhead was real, but somewhere in the chain of custody, your sample and another patient's sample were switched. When we ran your new test here and it came back negative, I personally called the original lab. They've launched a full investigation. You can imagine the liability issues." "I don't have HIV," Alexander repeated, the words foreign in his mouth. "No, you're completely healthy. I'm so sorry for what you've been through. This kind of error is inexcusable." Alexander started laughing. It began as a small chuckle and built into near hysterical laughter that bordered on sobbing. Dr. Martinez pushed a box of tissues across the desk. "I left my wife," Alexander said when he could speak again, "on our wedding day. I left her standing there and I disappeared because I thought I was dying.
I thought I'd infect her. I've been living in a motel for 3 months preparing to die, and you're telling me it was all a mistake?" "Yes," Dr. Martinez said gently. "A terrible, unforgivable mistake. The lab will face serious consequences. But right now, what matters is that you're healthy and you can go home." "Go home," Alexander echoed. The concept seemed absurd. "I destroyed my life. My wife probably hates me. Everyone thinks I'm either dead or insane. How do I just go home and explain that it was all because of a lab error?" "The truth," Dr. Martinez said. "You tell her the truth. You show her this documentation." She pushed the file toward him. "This is proof of the error, the lab's admission of fault, everything you need to explain what happened." Alexander opened the file, seeing official letters from the laboratory, his test results, incident reports. It was all there, documented proof that his nightmare had been built on a mistake. "The other patient," Alexander asked, "the one who got my negative results while they actually had HIV. Dr. Martinez's face darkened. "They went 3 months without knowing their status or seeking treatment. They're receiving care now, but yes, there was harm done there too. The lab is facing multiple lawsuits." Alexander stood, the file clutched in his hands. He walked to the window and stared out at the parking lot, at the normal world where people went about their normal lives, not knowing how fragile it all was, how quickly everything could fall apart. "What if she doesn't forgive me?" he asked quietly. "What if I explain everything and she says it's not enough, that I should have trusted her with the truth instead of running?"
"Then that's her right," Dr. Martinez said. "But Mr. Hayes, you can't move forward while hiding in the past. You made a choice based on the information you had. It was the wrong choice, but it came from a place of love, not cowardice. At least give her the chance to understand that." Alexander turned back to face the doctor. "How do I even start? Just show up at her door after 3 months?" "That's exactly what you do. You show up, you tell the truth, and you accept whatever consequences come. It's the only way to find out if your marriage can survive this." He left the clinic in a daze, the file tucked under his arm. The afternoon sun felt too bright after months of keeping his motel room curtains closed. People passed him on the sidewalk, going about their lives, none of them knowing that his entire world had just inverted itself. He wasn't dying. He'd never been sick. 3 months of hell had been based on a clerical error. Alexander pulled out his burner phone and stared at it for a long moment. Then he turned it off and threw it in a trash can. He didn't need it anymore. He knew where he had to go. Victoria deserved the truth, and he deserved whatever judgment she passed on him. The house Alexander had purchased for their married life sat in a quiet neighborhood of established homes and mature trees. He'd designed it himself, spending a year getting every detail perfect. He'd imagined growing old here with Victoria, raising children in the backyard, building a lifetime of memories. Now, standing on the sidewalk 3 months after abandoning her, the house looked different. Darker somehow, even in the afternoon light. Victoria's car was in the driveway. She was home. Alexander's legs felt like lead as he walked up the front path. The garden Victoria had been so excited about was overgrown now, weeds choking the flower beds. A stack of newspapers sat on the porch, uncollected. The house had the neglected air of a place where someone was merely existing, not living. He raised his hand to knock, then noticed his wedding ring was still in his pocket. He'd carried it with him every day, unable to put it back on, unable to throw it away. Now he slipped it onto his finger. It still fit perfectly. Before he could overthink it further, Alexander knocked. Silence. Then footsteps. The door opened, and Victoria stood there, in sweatpants and an old t-shirt, her hair pulled back, her face bare of makeup. She looked thinner, older, exhausted, and when she saw him, her expression cycled through shock, disbelief, and finally rage. "You," she whispered, then louder. "You." "Victoria, I can explain. 3 months?" Her voice rose to a shout. 3 months, Alex! I thought you were dead.
I planned a memorial service. I've been working with private investigators, checking morgues, calling hospitals in every state, and you just show up at my door like nothing happened? I know, and I'm so sorry. Sorry? She laughed, a harsh sound, nothing like her usual joy. Are you sorry? Do you have any idea what you put me through? What everyone through? Your mother had a stroke from the stress. Your business partner had to shut down the firm. I've been destroyed, Alex. Completely destroyed. And you're sorry?
Tears were streaming down her face now. Alexander reached for her, but she slapped his hand away. Don't touch me. Don't you dare touch me. Please, just let me explain. I have proof. I have documentation. He held up the file from Dr. Martinez. I don't care about your documentation. What could possibly excuse what you did? What reason could possibly be good enough? I thought I was dying, Alexander said, the words tumbling out. I got a test result at the reception. HIV positive. I thought I had contracted HIV and I panicked. I thought if I stayed, his voice broke. If we consummated the marriage, I could infect you. I couldn't do that to you, so I left. Victoria stared at him, her expression frozen. You thought you had HIV? Yes. I got the test results delivered by courier right there at the reception. Official lab results, my name on them, positive diagnosis. I thought I was going to die and I couldn't bear to take you down with me. So you just left, without explaining, without giving me a choice. I was trying to protect you. Protect me? Her voice was ice now. You protected yourself, Alex. You ran away because you were scared and you couldn't face telling me the truth. Don't dress up your cowardice as nobility. The words hit him like physical blows because they were true. He had been a coward. You're right, he said quietly. You're absolutely right. I should have told you. I should have trusted you with the truth. But I was terrified and I panicked and I made the worst decision of my life. And the HIV? Victoria asked. I assume you're about to tell me it was a mistake, that you're fine. It was a lab error. They mixed up my sample with another patient's. I never had it. I'm completely healthy. Victoria's laugh was bitter. Of course it was a mistake. So you destroyed our lives, put everyone through hell for nothing. Absolutely nothing. I didn't know it was a mistake. You thought wrong, and instead of coming to me, instead of letting me help you through it, instead of giving me any say in my own life, you just decided for both of us that our marriage was over. You took away my choice, Alex. That's what I can't forgive. Alexander felt his own anger rising now. I was trying to save you. Do you know what HIV meant? It meant I could kill you just by being with you. I couldn't live with that. So you decided to kill our marriage instead, without even asking me what I wanted. They stared at each other across the threshold, both breathing hard, years of planned future crumbling between them. I love you, Alexander said desperately. I never stopped loving you. Everything I did was because I love you. Love? Victoria shook her head. Love is trust, Alex. Love is partnership. Love is facing the hard things together. What you did, that was fear. And I don't know if I can build a life with someone who runs away the moment things get difficult. I'm here now, Alexander pleaded. I came back. I'm telling you the truth. Please, Victoria, please give me another chance. Let me prove that I can be the husband you deserve. Victoria was silent for a long moment, tears still streaming down her face. I don't know if you can be, Alex. I don't know if what we had can ever be recovered. You broke something fundamental when you left. Let me try, he begged. That's all I'm asking. Just let me try. I need time, Victoria finally said. I need time to think, to process this. You can't just show up and expect everything to go back to normal. I know. I understand. Just, can I call you? Can we talk? I don't know. Maybe. I need you to leave now, please. She started to close the door, and Alexander's desperation peaked. He put his hand on the door, stopping her.
"I'm not giving up on us," he said fiercely. "I know I don't deserve another chance, but I'm not giving up. I'll wait as long as it takes. I'll do whatever you need. Just don't give up on us completely." Victoria looked at him with eyes full of pain and exhaustion. "I already gave up, Alex, 3 months ago when you left me standing in that reception hall wondering what I'd done wrong. I grieved our marriage. I buried it. I moved on. You can't just dig it back up and expect it to live again." She closed the door gently but firmly, and Alexander heard the lock click into place. He stood on the porch for a long time, staring at the closed door, before finally walking back to his car. But he noticed something as he drove away. Victoria had been wearing a ring, not the one he'd given her, but a ring nonetheless. And that detail, more than anything else she'd said, filled him with cold dread.
Alexander rented an apartment across town and began the painful process of rebuilding his life. His architectural firm was gone, dissolved in his absence, but his reputation, once he explained the circumstances, began to slowly recover. Some clients were willing to give him another chance. His business partner was less forgiving. "You could have called me, man," he said when they finally spoke. "One phone call, that's all it would have taken. Instead, I lost everything too." Alexander had no defense. He'd destroyed multiple lives with his silence. His mother was in a rehabilitation facility, recovering from the stroke Victoria had mentioned. When Alexander visited, she wept and held his hand, torn between relief that he was alive and anger at what he'd put her through. "Why?" she kept asking. "Why couldn't you trust us?" He had no answer that satisfied her. But it was Victoria who occupied his every thought. He called her daily, left messages she didn't return. He sent flowers, letters, anything to show her he was serious about making amends. Sometimes she texted back brief responses, other times silence. 6 weeks after his return, she finally agreed to meet him for coffee. She looked better, healthier, her hair styled, wearing clothes that fit her properly again. But there was a guardedness in her eyes that hadn't been there before, a wall she'd built to protect herself. "Thank you for meeting me," Alexander said, as they sat across from each other in the cafe. "I'm only here because my therapist suggested it might help with closure," Victoria said bluntly. "Don't read too much into it." "Closure," Alexander repeated, the word tasting like ash. "Is that what you want? To close the door on us completely?" Victoria stirred her coffee, not meeting his eyes. "I don't know what I want anymore. For 3 months I wanted you back. I would have given anything to have you walk through the door, no matter what the reason for leaving was. But now that you have," she finally looked up at him, "I realized the person who left was someone I didn't really know, and I'm not sure I want to know him. I'm the same person you married. No, you're not. The person I married wouldn't have run away. The person I married would have trusted me enough to face a crisis together. You showed me who you really are when things get hard, Alex, and I can't unsee that." "People make mistakes," Alexander argued. "I made a terrible mistake, the worst mistake of my life, but I'm here now, trying to fix it. Doesn't that count for something?" "It counts for something," Victoria admitted, "but I don't know if it counts for enough." They sat in painful silence, years of dreams dying between them. "There's something else I need to tell you," Victoria said finally. "I've been seeing someone." The words hit Alexander like a punch to the gut. "Seeing someone? You mean—" "Dating, yes." Victoria's voice was gentle but firm. "I mourned you, Alex. I grieved our marriage, and after 2 months of that grief, I started trying to live again. A friend introduced me to someone. We've been seeing each other for about a month now." "A month?" Alexander said numbly. "It's only been 6 weeks since I came back." "And 3 months since you left," Victoria countered. "Did you expect me to wait forever for a man who abandoned me without a word?" "I expected—" Alexander stopped himself. What had he expected? That Victoria would be frozen in time, waiting for him to decide to return? That was exactly what he'd expected, he realized with shame.
I'm sorry. You're right. I have no claim on you anymore. No, you don't, but I wanted to tell you myself rather than have you hear it from someone else. His name is James. He's a teacher at the school where I volunteer. He's kind and stable, and he doesn't run away when things get difficult. Each word was a knife. Alexander forced himself to ask, "Are you in love with him?"
Victoria considered the question carefully. I don't know yet, but I'm open to the possibility. He makes me feel safe, Alex. Something I never realized I needed until I didn't have it. I can make you feel safe, Alexander said desperately. I can be that person for you. Please, Victoria, don't throw away what we had for someone you barely know. What we had? Victoria's voice hardened. What we had was a wedding day and a marriage that lasted approximately 4 hours before you destroyed it. I barely knew you either, apparently. We were in love with the idea of each other, but when reality hit, you disappeared. That's not fair. Life isn't fair, Alex. I learned that when I watched my husband walk out of our reception and vanish for 3 months. I learned it when I had to explain to everyone that I didn't know why you left. I learned it when I stood in front of news cameras begging for any information while you were hiding in a motel feeling sorry for yourself. Her anger was like ice, cold and cutting. Alexander had never seen this side of her before. I don't want to hurt you anymore, he said quietly. I just want a chance to make things right. Some things can't be made right, Victoria said. They can only be accepted and moved past. I'm trying to move past what you did, and that means moving forward with my life, with or without you in it. So this is it? We're just done? We've been done since you walked away, Alex. I'm just finally accepting it. Victoria stood, gathering her purse. I hope you find happiness. I really do. I hope you learn from this and become the kind of person who can handle a crisis without running. But I can't be the one to teach you that lesson. I can't sacrifice more of myself trying to fix what you broke. She walked out of the cafe, leaving Alexander sitting alone with cold coffee and shattered hopes. Outside the window, he watched her get into a car. A man was in the driver's seat, James, presumably. He leaned over and kissed her cheek, and she smiled at him. A small smile, but genuine. Alexander felt something break inside him, something that had been barely holding together since he'd received that test result. He'd lost her. Truly, completely lost her. And it was entirely his own fault.
The next 2 months were a blur of unsuccessful attempts to rebuild his life. Alexander threw himself into work, taking on projects, trying to reestablish his architectural practice. But his heart wasn't in it. Every design felt hollow, every client interaction forced. He drove past the house he'd built for Victoria regularly, watching from a distance. Sometimes James's car was in the driveway. Once, Alexander saw them in the garden together, planting new flowers where the old ones had died. James was making Victoria laugh, the sound carrying across the quiet street. Alexander's therapist, court-mandated as part of his return to normal life, told him this behavior was unhealthy, that he needed to let go. You're fixating, Dr. Phillips said during one session. You're turning Victoria into an obsession instead of accepting that the relationship is over. It doesn't have to be over, Alexander insisted. If she would just listen, just give me one more real chance. She has listened. She's made her choice. The question is whether you can accept that choice or whether you're going to let it destroy you. But Alexander couldn't accept it, wouldn't accept it. Victoria was his wife. They'd made vows. Yes, he'd broken those vows by leaving, but didn't the fact that he came back count for something? Didn't his explanation matter? He started showing up places he knew Victoria would be. Her volunteer sessions at the school, the coffee shop she frequented, the yoga studio she attended. He told himself he just wanted to talk to her, to make her understand. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. He was watching her, following her, trying to find a way back into her life. Victoria noticed. She sent him a text.
"You need to stop. This is becoming harassment. If you don't stop, I'll get a restraining order." The threat should have shocked him into reality. Instead, it made him angry. Harassment? He was her husband. He had a right to fight for their marriage. His mother visited his apartment and was horrified by what she found. Unwashed dishes piled in the sink, empty bottles scattered around, and most disturbing, dozens of photos of Victoria plastered on one wall. Some were from their wedding day, others he'd clearly taken recently without her knowledge. "Alex, honey, you need help," his mother said gently. "Real help. This isn't healthy." "I just need her to understand," Alexander said, his words slurring slightly. He'd been drinking more lately, just to sleep, just to quiet the thoughts that wouldn't stop spinning. "She does understand. She just doesn't forgive you, and you have to accept that." "I can't." "Then you're going to lose more than just Victoria. You're going to lose yourself." But Alexander couldn't hear her. He was too far gone, too deep into his obsession with recovering what he'd lost. He learned James's full name, James Monroe, 5th grade teacher, 33 years old, divorced, no children. He seemed boring to Alexander, plain and ordinary. What could Victoria possibly see in him? Then Alexander saw them together at a restaurant celebrating something. They were laughing, toasting with wine glasses, looking at each other the way Alexander and Victoria used to look at each other. And when James pulled out a small box and opened it, revealing a ring, Alexander's world went red. Victoria said yes. Alexander could see her mouth form the word even from his position across the street. She said yes to a man she'd known for 3 months while refusing to even consider reconciling with her actual husband. That night, Alexander broke into the house, his house, the one he'd designed and built. He stood in the bedroom he'd imagined sharing with Victoria, seeing evidence of James everywhere. Men's clothes in the closet, a second toothbrush in the bathroom. They were living together, in his house. Victoria found him there, standing in the dark when she came home. "Alex, what are you doing here?" Her voice was scared now, not angry. "How did you get in?" "It's my house," Alexander said. "I built it. Every wall, every room, I designed it for us." "You need to leave right now." "He doesn't love you like I do," Alexander said, his voice breaking. "He doesn't know you. I know your favorite movie is the one your mom took you to when you were 8. I know you cry at sad commercials. I know you hum when you're cooking. He doesn't know those things." "Maybe not yet," Victoria said, pulling out her phone, "but he will, and he'll be there to learn them instead of running away. Now leave or I'm calling the police. You're my wife." "We were never really married, Alex. The marriage was annulled. Legally, we were never husband and wife. You made sure of that when you left." The words shattered something in Alexander's already fragile grip on reality. "No, we made vows, before God and everyone." "Please leave," Victoria whispered, tears in her eyes now. "Please, Alex, before this gets worse." Alex left, but he didn't go far. He sat in his car down the street, watching the house, watching James arrive home an hour later, watching them embrace in the doorway, James probably comforting her after the scare of finding her ex-husband in their house. His phone rang. His lawyer. "Alex, Victoria's attorney just contacted me. They're filing for a restraining order tomorrow. They have evidence of stalking, harassment, breaking and entering. You need to stop this, now, before you end up in jail." "She's making a mistake," Alexander said. "James isn't right for her. That's not
your decision to make anymore." But it should be, Alexander thought. It should be his decision. She was his wife. His. And if he couldn't have her, a dark voice whispered in his mind, if she was really going to marry someone else and erase their relationship completely, no, he pushed the thought away. He wasn't that person. He wasn't capable of. But the thought kept coming back, getting louder, drowning out reason and sanity and everything else. If Victoria was going to destroy their marriage, destroy his life, destroy everything he'd been trying to fix, maybe she needed to understand what real loss felt like. Alexander sat in his apartment,
the wall of Victoria photos staring at him like judges. His rational mind knew this had gone too far, that he was spiraling into something dangerous. But the rational part was getting quieter each day, drowned out by obsession and desperation and alcohol. The restraining order had been filed. He had been formally served papers that morning. He was to stay at least 500 feet away from Victoria, her workplace, her home, and James. Any violation would result in immediate arrest. 500 feet. He couldn't even drive down their street anymore, couldn't see the house he'd built, couldn't accidentally run into her at the places she frequented. She was erasing him from her life completely. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. When he opened it, he saw a wedding invitation. Victoria and James were getting married in 2 weeks, a small ceremony, immediate family only, at the Botanical Gardens. The invitation wasn't for him. Someone had sent it to him, probably one of the mutual friends who felt sorry for him. Maybe they thought he deserved to know. Maybe they were just being cruel. 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, Victoria would marry another man, would promise forever to someone else, would erase the vows she'd made to Alexander as if they'd never existed. He couldn't let that happen. Alexander knew this thinking was wrong, knew he'd crossed from persistent into obsessive, into something darker, but he couldn't stop. The thought of Victoria with James, of them building a life together in the house Alexander had created, of her laughing and loving and living with someone else, it was unbearable. He began to plan. Not to hurt Victoria, never Victoria. He loved her too much for that. But James? James was the obstacle. James was the interloper who'd stolen his wife while he was at his lowest. James was the reason Victoria wouldn't even consider reconciliation. If James wasn't in the picture anymore, Victoria would have to face reality, would have to confront the fact that she was still married to Alexander in every way that mattered, would have to give their relationship another chance. The thought should have horrified him. He'd never been a violent person. He'd built his career on creating beautiful things, not destroying them. But the line between creation and destruction was thinner than he'd realized, and he'd already crossed it the day he walked out of that wedding reception. Alexander began watching James instead of Victoria. He learned his schedule: school from 7:30 to 3:30, soccer practice with the school team until 5, home by 6. He lived a predictable, boring life, easy to track, easy to predict, easy to intercept. Alexander's phone rang. His therapist, Dr. Phillips. "Alex, you missed our appointment yesterday. I'm concerned." "I'm fine," Alexander lied. "Your mother called me. She's worried about you. She says you're not returning her calls, that you seem disconnected from reality." "I'm dealing with things in my own way."
That's what concerns me. Alex, I need you to hear this. What you're feeling right now is a crisis. The obsession with Victoria, the inability to accept the relationship is over. These are warning signs. I think you should consider inpatient treatment for a while. I don't need to be locked up. I need my wife back. She's not your wife anymore, and until you accept that, you're going to keep spiraling. Please, come in. Let's talk about this. Alexander hung up. Dr. Phillips didn't understand. None of them understood. They weren't fighting for their soulmate, for the life they were supposed to have. He drove past the school where James taught, parking across the street. Children poured out at 3:30, running to waiting parents, to buses, to freedom. James emerged at 4, carrying a soccer ball and a bag of equipment, heading toward the field where practice would start soon. So predictable, so vulnerable. Alexander's hands gripped the steering wheel. He could end this now, could solve all his problems with one action. James would be gone, Victoria would be free, they could start over. But he couldn't move. Some last shred of decency, of the person he used to be, held him frozen in the car. A knock on his window made him jump. A police officer stood there, gesturing for him to roll down the window. "Sir, can I ask what you're doing here?" Alexander's mind raced. I was meeting someone."
This is a school zone. You're parked directly across from the school. We've had complaints about a man matching your description loitering in this area." The restraining order. James must have told the police to watch for him. "I'm leaving now," Alexander said, starting the car. "I'm going to need to see your license and registration first." The officer ran his information, found the restraining order, and warned him that if he was seen in this area again, he'd be arrested. Alexander drove away, shaking with rage and humiliation. They were all against him, all of them trying to keep him from what was rightfully his. That night, Alexander stood in his apartment, staring at the photos of Victoria, and made his decision. He couldn't approach James in public, couldn't risk another police encounter, but there were other ways, private ways. He knew where James lived, a modest townhouse on the other side of town. He knew James's routine, and he knew that in 2 weeks, on the morning of the wedding, James would be home alone getting ready for the ceremony. That's when Alexander would act. Not at the school surrounded by witnesses, not in public where he could be stopped, but in private, where it would be just the two of them, where Alexander could make James understand that Victoria belonged to someone else. He told himself he just wanted to talk to James, to convince him to step aside. But deep down, in the part of his mind that was still rational, he knew that wasn't true. He was planning murder. And the worst part was, he didn't care anymore.
The morning of Victoria's wedding dawned clear and beautiful, the kind of perfect September day that seemed designed for new beginnings. Alexander had barely slept, his mind running through the plan over and over, looking for flaws, for ways it could go wrong. James would be at his townhouse until noon, then leaving to meet Victoria at the Botanical Gardens for a 1 o'clock ceremony. That gave Alexander a window of opportunity, a few hours when James would be alone, getting ready, unsuspecting. Alexander dressed carefully in dark clothes, nondescript, forgettable. He'd parked his car 3 blocks from James's townhouse the night before, walking the rest of the way through alleys and side streets where security cameras were sparse. He'd thought of everything. At 10 a.m., he approached the townhouse. James's car was in the driveway. Lights were on inside. Alexander could see movement through the windows. James moving around, probably choosing his wedding outfit, maybe on the phone with the florist or the caterer, handling last-minute details. Living the life that should have been Alexander's. Alexander's hand went to his jacket pocket, feeling the weight of the kitchen knife he'd brought. He'd agonized over the weapon choice. A gun would be too loud, too likely to attract attention. The knife was quieter, more personal, more fitting somehow. He approached the front door, his heart pounding. This was it, the point of no return. Once he knocked on that door, once James answered, everything would change. But maybe it needed to change. Maybe this was the only way to make Victoria understand, to make her see that they belonged together, that no one else could ever take his place. Alexander knocked. Footsteps inside. The door opened. James stood there in jeans and a t-shirt, his hair wet from a recent shower, a coffee mug in his hand. His expression shifted from polite curiosity to alarm as he recognized Alexander. "You need to leave," James said immediately. "There's a restraining order. I'm calling the police." Alexander pushed his way inside before James could close the door, forcing him backward into the townhouse. James stumbled, the coffee mug falling and shattering on the hardwood floor. "We need to talk," Alexander said, closing the door behind him. "There's nothing to talk about. Victoria made her choice. She made the wrong choice. You don't belong with her. You barely know her." "I know her better than you think," James said, backing away slowly, his eyes darting around for an escape route or a weapon. "I know she's been through hell because of you. I know she's finally starting to heal, and I know she loves me." "She doesn't love you," Alexander snarled. "She's confused, traumatized. She's latching onto the first stable thing she found after I—" He stopped himself. "After you abandoned her?" James finished. "Yeah, I know all about that. How you left her standing at her own wedding reception. How you disappeared for 3 months. How you came back expecting her to just forgive you and move on.
I was sick. I thought I was dying." "So she told me. And you know what I would have done in that situation? I would have told her. I would have trusted her to handle it like an adult. Instead, you ran away like a coward." Alexander's hand tightened on the knife in his pocket. "Don't call me a coward." "What else would you call it? You made a choice to protect yourself instead of trusting your wife, and now you can't accept the consequences of that choice. She's still my wife."
"No, she's not," James said flatly. "The marriage was annulled. Legally, it never existed. You keep clinging to something that was already dead before it began." Alexander pulled out the knife. The sight of it made James go very still. "You need to leave her alone," Alexander said, his voice shaking. "You need to walk away. Tell her you changed your mind about the wedding. Break up with her. Give me a chance to fix what I broke." "Or what? You'll kill me?" James's voice was calmer than it should have been for a man facing a knife. "You think Victoria will come running back to you if I'm dead? You think she won't know exactly who did it?" "I'll make it look like an accident." "No, you won't, because you're not a killer, Alex. You're a scared man who made a terrible mistake and can't figure out how to live with the consequences. But murder? That's not you." "You don't know what I am," Alexander said, taking a step closer. "You don't know what I'm capable of." "I know you love Victoria," James replied. "I know that everything you've done, even the worst of it, has been because you love her. And I know that if you hurt me, you'll lose her forever. Whatever tiny chance you might have had will be gone." "I've already lost her. This morning she's marrying you. There's no chance left." "Then why are you here? If it's already over, why threaten me with a knife?" The question stopped Alexander cold. Why was he here? What was he really trying to accomplish? "I just want her to be happy," he said finally, and was surprised to realize it was true. "I want her to have the life we planned. The house, the children, the future. I want her to be happy." "Then let her go," James said gently. "Let her have that life, even if it's not with you." "How?" Alexander's voice broke. "How do I just let go of the person I love most in the world?" "The same way she did. One day at a time, one choice at a time. You accept that love sometimes means stepping aside, even when it destroys you." They stood there in the broken glass and spilled coffee. Alexander holding a knife he no longer wanted to use, James watching him with something like pity. "I can't," Alexander whispered. "I can't lose her." "You already have. The question is whether you're going to make it worse by doing something you can't take back." Alexander looked at the knife in his hand, really seeing it for the first time, seeing what he'd become, a man threatening another man with violence over a woman who'd made her choice clear. This wasn't love. This was obsession, possession, madness. He lowered the knife. "I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry." "Put down the knife, Alex. Just put it down and walk away." Alexander's hand trembled. He wanted to put it down, wanted to walk away, to let Victoria have her happiness, to accept defeat with some shred of dignity remaining. But then he thought about Victoria walking down the aisle toward James, thought about James slipping a ring on her finger, kissing her, taking her home to the house Alexander built, thought about them having children, growing old together, living the entire life that should have been his. And something in him snapped completely. "No," Alexander said. "No, I can't do it. I can't let you have her." He lunged forward, the knife raised. James tried to dodge, but there wasn't enough room, and Alexander was driven by months of frustration and loss, and desperate love turned poisonous. The knife plunged into James's chest.
Time seemed to slow down. Alexander watched, almost disconnected from his own body, as James's eyes widened in shock and pain. Blood bloomed across his white t-shirt, spreading rapidly from where the knife protruded from his chest. James stumbled backward, his hand going to the knife, mouth opening but no sound coming out. He hit the wall and slid down to a sitting position, leaving a smear of red on the white paint.
Alexander stood frozen, staring at what he'd done. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. He was an architect, not a murderer. He built things, created beauty, designed homes for families to grow in. He didn't kill people. But the blood pooling on James's floor said otherwise. "I didn't," Alexander started, his voice strange in his own ears. "I didn't mean—" James was making gasping sounds now, his breathing wet and labored. His face had gone gray, his eyes unfocused. He was going into shock, dying right there in his own living room on what was supposed to be his wedding day. Alexander's paralysis broke. He pulled out his phone to call 911, but his hands were shaking so badly he dropped it. The phone skittered across the floor, coming to rest in the spreading pool of blood. "Help," James managed to whisper. "Please." I'll get help." Alexander scrambled for his phone, picking it up with blood-slicked fingers. He dialed 911, but before it could connect, he heard a sound that made his heart stop. A key turning in the front door lock. "James? I know I'm early, but I couldn't wait," Victoria's voice called out as she pushed open the door. She was wearing a simple white dress, her hair done up with flowers, looking radiant and happy. Then she saw the scene before her. James slumped against the wall, the knife in his chest, blood everywhere. And Alexander standing there, phone in hand, blood on his clothes, the guilty party undeniable. Victoria's scream could probably be heard 3 blocks away. "No, no, 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 James!" She ran to him, dropping to her knees in the blood, her white dress immediately staining red. Her hands hovered over the knife, afraid to touch it, afraid to make it worse. "Victoria!" Alexander said, but his voice sounded like it was coming from very far away. She looked up at him then, and the expression on her face was something he'd never seen before. Pure, undiluted horror, mixed with a hatred so intense it was like a physical force. "You," she breathed, "you did this. You actually did this?" "I didn't mean to. It was an accident." "An accident?" Her voice rose to a shriek. "You accidentally came to his house with a knife? You accidentally stabbed him in the chest?" James made another wet, gasping sound. His breathing was getting worse, more labored. His face was starting to glaze over. Victoria turned back to him, cradling his face in her bloody hands. "Stay with me, baby. Stay with me. Help is coming. You're going to be okay." But they all knew he wasn't going to be okay. Alexander finally managed to complete the 911 call, his voice mechanical as he reported the stabbing, gave the address. The operator asked him to stay on the line, but he dropped the phone. "I'm sorry to Victoria. I'm so sorry. I didn't want this. I just wanted us to have another chance." Victoria's head snapped up, her eyes blazing. "You wanted me back? So you killed the man I love? You think that's how you win someone back?"
"He was in the way. He was keeping us apart. We kept us apart. You kept us apart when you left me. There was no us anymore, Alex. There hasn't been for months. And now," her voice broke, "now you've killed an innocent man because you couldn't accept that." James's breathing had become almost imperceptible. His eyes were closing. Victoria shook him gently, desperately. "No, James, please. Please don't leave me. Please." In the distance, sirens wailed. Help was coming, but it was too late. Alexander could see death approaching, could see the light fading from James's eyes. "I love you," Victoria whispered to James, tears streaming down her face. "I love you so much. You were going to be my husband. We were going to have babies. We were going to grow old together. Please don't go. Please." But James was already gone. His final breath left his body in a long, rattling exhale, and then he was still. His eyes stared at nothing. Blood no longer pumped from his wound because his heart had stopped beating. Victoria let out a sound that was beyond crying, beyond screaming. It was the sound of a soul breaking in half. She clutched James's body to her, rocking him, her white wedding dress now completely soaked in his blood.
The police kicked in the already open door 30 seconds later, guns drawn. They found Victoria holding James's body and Alexander standing there with blood on his hands, the picture of guilt. "Down on the ground, now!" the officers shouted.
Alexander complied, lying face down on the blood-slick floor. He felt the handcuffs click around his wrists, felt them haul him to his feet, heard them reading him his rights. But none of it felt real. What felt real was Victoria's gaze following him as they led him out. The hatred in her eyes was absolute, consuming. He'd wanted her back, wanted her to understand how much he loved her. Instead, he'd destroyed any possibility of redemption. He'd killed the man she loved. He'd ensured that the last emotion she'd ever feel for him was pure, perfect hatred. The EMTs rushed in, but there was nothing they could do for James. He was dead, murdered on his wedding day by a man who couldn't accept rejection. As the police car pulled away, Alexander looked back at the townhouse. He could see Victoria through the window, still holding James' body, still covered in blood, her future shattered once again by Alexander's choices. He'd lost her completely now, and he'd taken an innocent life in the process. The man he used to be, the successful architect, the loving fiancé, was gone. In his place was a murderer, a monster, someone who'd let obsession and desperation turn him into something unrecognizable. And there was no coming back from this. The trial took 6 months. Alexander's lawyers tried to argue temporary insanity, extreme emotional disturbance, diminished capacity due to the trauma of the false diagnosis. None of it mattered. The evidence was overwhelming. The knife had Alexander's fingerprints. His DNA was all over the crime scene. Security cameras had captured him approaching the townhouse. And most damning of all, Victoria's testimony. She sat on the witness stand in black, looking like she'd aged 10 years in 6 months. Her voice was steady as she described finding James bleeding out, described watching him die in her arms, described the blood-soaked wedding dress she'd been wearing. "The defendant took everything from me," she said, looking directly at Alexander for the first time since the murder. "He took my husband on what should have been the happiest day of my life. He took my future. He took my ability to trust or love or feel safe. And for what? Because I wouldn't take him back after he abandoned me? Because I had the audacity to try to move on with my life?" Alexander's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. The jury had heard enough. They deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning a verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. At sentencing, the judge was harsh. "Mr. Hayes, you have shown a complete lack of remorse for your actions. You claim you loved your victim's fiancé, but your actions demonstrate only obsession and possession. You couldn't have the life you wanted, so you destroyed the life she was building. You are a danger to society, and particularly to Miss Bennett. I hereby sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole."
Life in prison. Alexander would die behind bars, would never again see the sky without razor wire, would never design another building or hold another woman, or have any of the life he'd once taken for granted. All because of a lab error that led to a moment of panic that spiraled into obsession that ended in murder. Victoria sat in the courtroom gallery, flanked by James's parents, who'd attended every day of the trial. When the sentence was read, she didn't cry or cheer or react at all. She simply stood and walked out, disappearing from Alexander's life forever.
If you want to uncover more chilling true crime stories and see justice exposed, subscribe to Crime Vaults as we bring light to the darkest true crime cases and never miss the secrets hidden in plain sight.